Welcome to the Millennial Body Image Project, where we dive into the unique and messy body image journey that continues to shape our generation.
We're here to flip the script on toxic wellness culture, challenge weight stigma, and tackle the intersectional forces that shape how we see our bodies and our health.
Because your body is not a problem to be fixed. Here we go.
Oh, man. So,
Happy New Year's.
Speaking of Happy New Year, you know that diet or that program that you were thinking about starting today? How about no?
We got new plans, guys.
We have new plans. Today we're going to be talking about what Christina brilliantly called the post-holiday body image Sunday Scaries, which is basically New Year's resolution season. Yeah. But it's like the most intense Sunday Scaries of the entire year. So we're going to be talking about why it feels that way, what we can do about it for body image, for food, for a lot of different things. So let's get into it.
It is a true body, Sunday Scaries, though, because it is like, I think maybe this year it might also just be on steroids too, because
Ozempic.
If I had $1 for every time
I'm so sorry if all of you just got that stuck in your head for the rest of the day. I'm so sorry.
I also told Casey recently when I heard that commercial that I was like, damn, they know exactly who they're marketing towards, because that is a very nostalgic jingle from our generation. And so I was like, oh my God, they know exactly who they're marketing towards. They're like hitting us hard with this shit. So the whole point of that is, if you are feeling a little lost or feeling like you're missing out on something or really anxious or not feeling prepared for the life ahead of you or 2025, there is this idea, when there is the new year, it's really natural to feel like I want to do something, or I want to wipe the slate clean, or I want to reincorporate behaviors in, or I want to add in new behaviors in. Maybe something that 2024 just didn't feel like it had the time or space or capacity for you to do, or the resources. And you're like, no, I really want to be intentional about incorporating these things. There is this idea, this anxiousness of feeling not prepared for the upcoming year. And then also is intersecting with the resolution culture, where it's like, now is the time. And if you don't do all of this now, it sets the tone for the rest of 2025. But I was saying to Dana before we recorded this, I said, guys, we need to stop doing that already, because since 2020 was the last time we could all mentally say, I'm really excited about the next year. 2020 is going to be the year. And then what happened? Each year since then, it has gotten bonkier and bonkier and bonkier. And let me tell you guys, January 20th is coming. We know what's happening. 2025, as far as I'm concerned, has already been a little bit like, we're just going to try to get through this time. And so I feel maybe this is not so good, but the way that I'm looking at it and how I want other people to look at it is to take the pressure off of yourself to feel like you have to overhaul everything right now and have this feeling of it has to be perfect, or like it's either like now or bust. Mm-hmm. And it's not the case. 2025 is going to be long. We have plenty of time, and you don't have to jump all in. And there is this idea, especially when you're coming off of everyone talking about food and bodies and everything, and you're seeing family and all of the holiday talk and all the body stuff and routines getting thrown off, that there is this idea of like, okay, now I have to start. I have to do this thing, or everything is just going to continue to unravel, and I'm just going to continue living this life of chaotic and non-routine, non-structure, and all of the things that we're feeling, that people tend to feel at this time of year. And so I just want people to know this is what this episode's about, that you don't have to do that, and that everything's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, if you are feeling the urge or the need to do something like that, we're also going to share with you, how can we do that in a non-all or nothing way, a non-perfectionistic way, a non-diet, non-restrictive way. So we're going to be talking about that at the end of the episode too. But I also just want to say, after the dumpster fire that was 2024, of course you want to do something to change. Of course you do. It would honestly be wild unless you are extremely burnt out. I feel seen, right? But if you're extremely burnt out, it'd be like, I just want to exist. I just want to survive. And that's it. Yeah, I get it, right? I also completely get the sentiment that I feel like I want to change something so that 2025 is not as much of a dumpster fire that 2024 was. Completely get it. And so when Christina was talking about routines, we frequently talk about this in September. We talk about it around the beginning of the year. One of the reasons why people feel so drawn to the shiny and new and the prospect of change and the promise of change from all these different wellness culture companies and diet culture and fitness things and everything is that over the holidays, we get so thrown off of our typical routines and doing the things that we know help us feel good on a daily and weekly basis that of course you feel like you need to do something to even at minimum just jumpstart the things that you know at baseline help you feel good. We see you, we're going to help you do that. And part of this also is there's a feeling of FOMO that like everybody else is doing something and you don't want to miss out. And it also weirdly kind of feels like if you don't jump on to like 75 hard or whatever it is the kids are doing these days or TikTok is doing these days or whatever, there's this weird dichotomy that happens of if I'm not participating in these what should be called disordered programs and behaviors and everything, then I'm never going to be able to do anything on my own. And I'm just a piece of crap because everybody's leaving me behind. And I'm just going to continue the dumpster fire that was 2024. And I'm never going to feel good about myself. When really, those are the two extremes. And you can live somewhere in the middle where you don't have to do one of these extreme, all or nothing, perfectionistic programs that are promising like unicorns and to give you the world or like a natural version of Ozempic. It's not like if you don't do this, then you're the worst and nothing's ever going to change. So we want to talk about what is the middle ground between feeling like, oh, I have to choose disordered eating or choosing being a lazy piece of shit, which is absolutely what it feels like. And
well, that's clearly the narrative, right? Like the narrative is if you are not doing all of these things and trying to actively change your body, then you are lazy pieces of S, you know? And like, to me, it gives us this sense that we are going to spiral and that we are spiraling. And if we don't lock it up, if we don't figure out how to control these behaviors and get on board with something else, then it feels like it's just going to spiral out of control. And this is like who you're going to be living your life as now, as this person who has no health promoting behaviors. And you just have to succumb and accept the reality that is your health and body and all the things, right? And it's like, it gives you this idea that it's either one way or the other, but that's their marketing, guys. That's their marketing. That's how they get you because that's how they shame you into buying their products. Because if they didn't tap into that, no one would ever buy it because newsflash, health promoting behaviors are fucking free, y'all. It's free. Dana's laughing so hard she muted herself.
Yeah, I had to mute myself. But also, I want to go back to, because listen, I will never miss an opportunity to shit all over Whole30 or any of these other programs. But I have to say, those programs don't exist if they don't have you come back year after year, month after month. Because it is not a sustainable business model to just go bonkers during January and then nobody pays attention to you the rest of the year. So
yeah, no.
That's something to think about as well, is these are not only disordered programs, but they're also businesses and they have to get you to keep coming back. And especially in the face of something like Ozempic and all these other weight loss medications and all these other things that are coming out, these diet and fitness companies and all these wellness companies and stuff, they're finding new ways to get you in there. They're trying to find new words, new phrases, new things that are really going to tug on your heartstrings. You're like, we got to get them in here somehow because otherwise they are deceased as a business. So they're going to try and get you in however they can. And like Christina always liked to say, diets and all these other programs do not own health promoting behaviors.
And this is, it's just what they make you feel like they do. Like that's just it. And it probably because for a really long time, the only way that you really felt like you actually engaged with those things is when you were doing something like this. And the idea of trying to marry intention and health promoting behaviors and integrating that into your life feels like you have to be doing it all or not at all, or it feels like it's all or not at all, that doesn't make it true. Like, just because we've been doing this for a long time and you've been told this for a long time, and this is how it's been deeply like incepted into our brains, doesn't mean that that's the reality. And that doesn't mean that you can't create your own relationship with health promoting behaviors that is your own. And that doesn't mean that it's either one or the other. But I get it. I get how it feels like when these things are coming up, or when this time of year especially, or coming off of the heels of travel and holiday parties and all of this stuff, where you might be seriously grappling with a lot of shame or body issues or guilt about choices that you've made, and feeling like, oh my God, I just need something to come in here and wipe the slate clean. And so I can feel better about myself, my body, my choices, all of these types of things. It makes a lot of sense that you'd be feeling that way. And this is like how they get you, you know? And we're here to remind you today that, one, there's ways to combat that shame and guilt that they incept into you. And two, there are ways for you to incorporate health promoting behaviors in a way that feels authentic and non-shaming for you. Because ultimately, health promoting behaviors are wonderful things to incorporate that should never be rooted in shame or guilt. They should never be that. They're part of living. Moving your body is a natural thing for us to do as human beings. Feeling good and eating a variety of different things is something that people feel good doing. And the reason why we feel guilty and shamed and uncomfortable with incorporating those things is because of the messages we've been hearing our entire lives, and the way that we have been programmed to value body size over everything else. And so if you're struggling with that, it makes a lot of sense. And coming out on New Year's and having all this stuff, it's just like this perfect storm to make it really difficult for you to navigate and to not be feeling those things. It's really hard not to.
Because while we say, and we will continue to say year after year, episode after episode, that diets do not own health promoting behaviors, the reason we have to say that is because these programs have attempted to co-opt those health promoting behaviors into making you think that you cannot do those on your own without a structured plan and accountability and perfectionism and this all or nothing mentality and capitalism, right? Because if you do feel like, and a lot of us do until you get to the point where you're unlearning a lot of this stuff and relearning it with like our podcast or working with us or any other place that you go where they're having this more non-diet, non-restrictive approach, it almost creates this barrier. And we've talked a lot about this with exercise, especially with Christina. We've talked about it over the summer. We had an episode over on Patreon called like, what if I don't want to exercise? And you might laugh at that, but at the same time, a lot of people feel this way because exercise specifically and movement has been so tied to weight loss and body size for a lot of people over the years. And maybe they were like forced to exercise, or they felt like they were forced to exercise because they needed to lose weight, or they were told they needed to lose weight. There's this huge barrier that goes up of like, well, I don't know how to have a relationship with movement without it being forceful and without it feeling like I'm doing this because I want to lose weight. So when we're trying to reframe and reshape a lot of the shame and a lot of the guilt around food and movement and body image, this is where we're going to start breaking stuff down of like, hey, this is probably why you feel this way. It's so common that you feel this way because a lot of the time people are not talking about like, what do you mean you have this weird barrier with exercise? You know, it's probably something that you're thinking about all the time, but other people are not really talking about. And so we're here to talk about the nuance of it, why you feel that way, and then what you can do about it without signing up for like freaking 75 hard, AKA, what did I call it in the beginning of this year? 75 no thanks, I'm busy that day. That's what I called it.
Not doing it. I think also too, there's like this idea also that gets wrapped into this. And I think maybe 75 hard is like the perfect example of it, because there's like this idea that I have to create a huge checklist of things that I have to accomplish every day. in order to be a quote unquote healthy person or be taking care of my body, my mind, my all of the different aspects of things now. Well, it used to be like a beautiful, more open-minded approach to like, oh, I'm going to take care of my body, my mind, and my spirit, and like all of like my emotional health, mental health, all the things. They like had to take it and like twist it into like the sadistic idea of being like, okay, now it's going to be rooted in obsession and perfectionism and all of the things. So to me, I feel like one of the things that I think is important for us to kind of remember, one is let's just set a quick reminder. Your body shape and size says nothing about you as a person. It doesn't. It doesn't tell us anything about what your body's capable of doing or not capable of doing, or what you choose to do with your body or not choose with your body. It doesn't tell us any of that. And despite what we've been told, that is just not, that is a fact. Your body shape does not say anything about you as a person, and you are so beyond that. And it's really hard to feel disconnected from that. And the idea that what I really want for everybody in 2025 is to reclaim that for themselves, to reclaim your body, reclaim the health promoting behaviors that you want to carry forward with you. And do it in a way that feels authentic and natural and joyful to you. And, and reclaim the idea that some of these things felt or feel unsafe to you to do because of the history that you have, or it feels like you have to do all or nothing around it, or you're some kind of failure. You're not. It's a very complex thing. This is why we have a podcast that's been going on for freaking years talking about this stuff. And it never seems to get old. There's always something new to talk about, or a new approach or angle, because it's really hard. And so I just want you guys to know that. And I also just want you guys to know too, your choice, whether or not to engage in reset culture or resolution culture in January, also says nothing about you as a person. Right. And I think also you also get to decide, even if you already signed up for something, you spent money, sunk cost fee, guys, like think about it that way. And then also the other thing too is like you get to decide to the degree that you want to do it. Right. Is there a spectrum here that you want to do? And so we want to let you guys know that we see that and that we understand why it might feel really hard right now, and why it might feel really enticing to go and do something like that. And let's also reclaim that and be able to create it in a way that feels really good and that feels like sustainable for you. Because I think everybody can agree most of the time, the goal here is to create sustainable health promoting behaviors in your life that feel like something that you can do. And a lot of times when what we have all seen over and over again is that it's not sustainable the way that it's marketed to us right now. And so let's take that off the plate. That's not real. It's not real. Like it's not how it's going to work, because inevitably life and complexities and things come up. And so let's take that pressure off of ourselves. Know that, hey, that's not real. They're not selling that for me. They can't guarantee that. So I'm going to take that pressure off. And now we actually have room to look at, how do I want to incorporate this in a way that feels good for me and that feels actually that could be part of my life.
Yeah. And before we go into, okay, great, how do we do this? I do want to talk about, because you mentioned an interesting point. It's like maybe you've already signed up for one of these kinds of things. Here would be a very interesting exercise is if you already, and this is not an encouragement to sign up, but if you have already signed up for one of these different kinds of programs, I would encourage you to look at it from a different angle than you ever have before, of what is this actually trying to get me to do? What is the long-term goal or intention that I have going into it? And how much of that, of what the program or whatever it is has assigned, right, or is showing up, how much of that do I actually need to do in order to make this a sustainable habit? Because you'll find you don't need to do things in an all or nothing kind of way in order to build sustainable habits. So it would be really interesting to see, how far do I have to take this in order to not make it all or nothing, but to make it more encouraging, let's say. And I don't have to be in the diet starts Monday mentality. I don't have to start over on day whatever because I broke a rule. But I also want to mention, even if you're not doing one of these things, it's easy to make a wellness productivity checklist for yourself. We've all done this before.
Oh,
But
who
what we
hasn't?
really want to encourage against for you is trying to do everything all at the beginning. Because listen, we're all burnt out already. We've been talking about this for months. There is no point in burning yourself out on health promoting behaviors in the first couple of weeks of January, because that is a surefire way to make sure that those habits are not going to be sustainable, at least in that like immediate short term, because there's no way you're going to be waking up at 4 a.m. and drinking 100 ounces of water and meditating every day and sleeping this much and also making all these perfect meals and blah, 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 blah. And you're probably
Oh
getting
my God.
stressed out.
I feel exhausted just hearing that, honestly. I'm
Honestly.
like, oh my God, no.
And it's like, that's not health, that's disorder. That's what that is. So let's stop playing games over there. And so we want to get into, what do we do about this, Christina? Help us out.
Oh, great. Okay, it's on me.
I'll chime in too.
Some of the things that I think about a lot is that there's this idea that if I'm relinquishing my hyper focus and fixation on health promoting behaviors, that I am then saying that I'm not going to engage in any health promoting behaviors. I don't care about that stuff. I don't care about my health, or it's all one or the other. When really all we're saying is I'm giving up my obsession. Right? I think a lot of times we have this feeling of, well, if I'm not obsessed and hyper controlled and overly intentional with making sure that I do things because I'm burnt out, because I have a busy schedule, because I have 3 kids, because I have this, all of the things, that all of these behaviors are going to fall to the wayside and I'm not going to be able to do them. But that's not necessarily true, right? The obsession isn't what helps us with our intention, right? The obsession is fed by shame. It's fed by guilt. It's fed by punishing our body and not feeling good enough and not feeling worthy and not feeling lovable. Like all of the things that we're all in therapy talking about. That's what's fueling all of that. And if we say, I'm not going to obsess over this anymore, that leaves like so much room in a spectrum from, oh, wow, I can do this from so many different angles and viewpoints, and it can actually look very different. And I don't have to say, well, to hell with it all. I'm not going to bother with any of it. And that's just not, that's almost, I think, like one of the biggest lessons that we have to learn is, especially when you're starting this out, is that there is this idea of, well, now I'm giving it all up and now I don't give a shit and I'm going to eat whatever I want, whenever I want to, and all of the different things. And there's this idea that you're throwing away everything that you care about. And I think that's where the values and rules come in.
Yeah.
For a lot of us, right? It's like we have this such a tightly wound, protected view of what our values are and what we believe is the manifestation of those values, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I want to say one more thing before you go into that is the cycle that you're describing of like, I'm obsessed with these health promoting behaviors and I'm doing all of them, or I'm like rejecting them and I'm not doing anything at all, is a very natural reaction to realizing, oh my God, I've been on this hamster wheel and I want to get off. And the only way that I know how to get off is to go cold turkey. That is exactly the same thing as the binge restrict cycle applied to health promoting behaviors. And it makes a lot of sense that is the same binge restrict cycle, because that's all we've known for that whole pattern with food, with exercise, is it feels like if I'm not doing it all, I'm not doing anything. Because what's the point of just doing 1 or 2 health promoting behaviors when I know I, quote, should be doing all of them at the same time? And then when we go through this kind of rebel phase of like anti-diet culture and I don't want to be a part of this anymore, it almost seems like you have to step away from it completely in order to completely reject diet culture. And I will say, for a lot of people, that is a very helpful thing to do And it's a very, I would say, like necessary step that they have to go through of proving to yourself that your self-worth and your health is not dependent on doing those things and engaging with those things in an obsessive way. But then what we can lead into, what Christina was going to go into, and I rudely interrupted her, was this conversation of values versus rules. And it's where we talk about if we have a value of health, for example, what are the ways that we uphold that value of health and the beliefs that we have about health? And this is what we go into changing, not the value of health that you have. Hello, we're nutritionists. We're not going to say that you shouldn't value health, right? You want longevity, we got to value our health. But it's figuring out valuing my health does not equal obsession with every single bite of food that is going in my body and every single step that I take and every ounce of water that goes in my mouth and every single supplement or whatever in the whole wellness productivity checklist. Those are the rules that we invite in or we put on our plates because we think if we follow those rules, it's the only way to uphold our value of health, when really that's not true. So let's go into it.
Yeah. Real quick before we go into it, another visual that I use with talking about the diet cycle and the binge restrict cycle, especially when it comes to these things too. And then it also does feed into the values and rules. So it will make sense in a second. But is I like to visualize...
circle. Welcome to the podcast.
I like to visualize a pendulum, actually, right? And so on one side is this highly restrictive program thing that I'm doing. I'm nailing it. You know, I'm like checking off everything. I'm doing all the things. And on the other side is the kind of like binge like lifestyle, right? Where it's like, I'm either doing all of these things, I'm maintaining this or not. But you know, you can't keep the weight over here on this one side of the pendulum forever. Eventually it can't sustain it and it lets go, right? And then it swings in the other direction. And the idea is to stop pulling it in any one direction over and over again. And is to kind of like let it fall naturally and sway from side to side, just gently hanging out in the middle, right? That's like ultimately the goal. And so the ways that we end up pulling and ricocheting into that restrictive tendency and things like that, I believe have a lot to do with the way that we have very limited and very strict views around what it looks like and feels like to live within our values. I think it'd be really difficult for most, find it not difficult, but unusual to find someone who says, well, I don't care about my health. Most people, with given a conversation, typically are like, no, I do, actually. The problem, the people that typically what I have found with clients that I've worked with and things like that, it's not that they don't value their health. It's that they're saying like, I'm rejecting the things that I've been told that make valuing health something that I have to do. They're rejecting the belief system that they have been indoctrinated into around that. It's not that they don't value their health. They do. Most of the times they talk to me about that. But then also there's also this other subset of people too. They're like, no, I'm obsessed with my health. Everything goes back to this. And I'm very aware. I'm looking up everything that I'm eating. I care a lot about this. I feel like I have my own nutrition license or whatever by like my own reading and research. Like you don't, by the way, like just heads up, you don't. That's not the same. Having an obsession with reading about something and having
does not a practitioner make.
It's not a practitioner make. And it's also,
but it makes an influencer.
It's also confirmation bias research, right? Are you reading everything and reading beyond what feeds your belief system? So to me, when I look at the values, we have all of these things that make up what we picture in that value, right? And then when we think about the value, we think, okay, what are the behaviors that show us that we are incorporating into the beliefs that we're having, right? If we believe that thin is healthy, then we might say, in order to maintain my size or to lose weight, I need to go to the gym X times a week, or I need to be eating this stuff and making these choices. Then we create rules because we love a little rule, right? And we love being able to say like, oh, I'm checking the list. I'm feeling good about this. I'm living within my values, blah, blah, blah. Check, 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 check. I'm feeling good. Hey, and we build these rules around it. And these rules that we're building are rooted in perfectionism. They're rooted in a belief system that's actually based off of shame and guilt around body sizes and around your body size, and basically saying that you can't exist in the body that you are. So when you're outside of those rules, when you're not doing those rules, it makes a shit ton of sense why you feel so awful. Because not only are you now not upholding the rules and not doing the things that you're not getting that dopamine hit of check, 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 check. I'm crushing it. I'm perfect. Like everything is great and wonderful in the world because I'm meeting this checklist. You're not getting that hit either. But now on top of it, now you're also not aligned with the values that you have. And that makes you feel even worse because now you're like, okay, now not only am I not meeting my checklist of things and the stuff that I have but now those checklists of things are not just like things that you're doing because you're like, oh, this is good for me. It's because it's attached to a value that you really care a lot about. It would be like, if you valued having a loving relationship with your kids and you continue to yell at them all the time. You're like, oh my God, why am I yelling at my kids all the time? Okay, well, it's because we're not living within our values. We have to look at what are we doing to do that. Oh, I need to learn how to self-regulate. Okay, cool. And that's why we feel so disconnected during this time. And that's why when, especially in periods where our routines get thrown off, the checklist gets thrown off, guys. And if the checklist gets thrown off, then the values get thrown out the window. And then we're shitty, terrible people who don't care about ourselves and we're just all going to die.
It's like that Office clip. Everyone remain calm.
Yes, it's like totally like that. Right. And so it makes sense that right now, while you're coming out of the holidays and out of like a chaotic, busy time, or you're burnt out, or you're overwhelmed, or you're stressed, and your kids are driving you nuts because they've been off for the past 2 weeks, or whatever it is, then you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, I would feel so much better if I just made a list of everything I need to do. This diet sounds wonderful. It's telling me everything I need to do, and I'm just going to relax and feel good about myself, and everything's going to be wonderful because I am now choosing something that's aligned with my values. But we're not looking at where that is stemming from, right? We're not looking at, oh, wow, I'm basing everything off of these belief systems I don't want to participate in anymore, or I'm trying to break free from, or are making me continually feel worse about myself when that's not what this is about.
Yeah, we're trying to feel better. And instead, a lot of us are feeling worse. So you might be thinking, but Dana and Christina, I can't just do nothing. So now what? So we're going to get into the now what, right? Part of this is education based. And you have this free podcast here, right? If you want more bonus episodes, you go over to Patreon, which will be linked. But when we think about, okay, well, part of this is I have to unlearn and relearn. Part of the unlearning is discovering what are my beliefs around this value that I'm trying to uphold? What are the rules that I feel like I'm supposed to uphold? Otherwise, I'm not upholding my value. So first, it's doing a little bit of an audit, as we like to say, about that. And then it's thinking about, okay, challenging those beliefs. Is this truly the only way that I can uphold my value of health? The answer is no. And so it's learning other ways of how can I upload, internet age. How can I uphold this value of health in a non-perfectionistic, non-all or nothing, non-super restrictive way, especially when it comes to food? And so one of the ways that we would encourage you to do that is to think about in your own life, what are, like Christina likes to call, your non-negotiables. And what we mean by that is even taking it to a micro level, right? Like on like a weekly basis, what are the things that really help you feel like you are set up for a solid week and you have like as much of a solid head on your shoulders as you possibly can, knowing that chaos is the norm?
Now, this is like how I approach my Sunday Scaries, right? What are the things that I feel like help me feel like my family is set up and myself set up for a relatively less rocky start of the week, right? Like, it's important that Elodie has her school uniforms clean. It's important that I have clean underwear,
To uphold my value of health, I need clean underwear. Facts.
We need access to clothing that's clean, right? And so, or we feel better, or we know like it's less chaotic and less overwhelming when I know that we have the things that everybody likes to have or gravitates towards for breakfast or for completing lunch boxes, all of these types of things, right? There's all of like, I look at it like, how do I feel a little less of the Sunday scaries when I have these things in place? And that's what we want you to do, but for our body image and for our health promoting behaviors and things like that. And that's what I mean by the non-negotiables. Another thing that I wanted to mention that's circling back to something that Dana said a few minutes ago about the values and having that rigidness around it. One of the things that I go back to, is I think when we have those feelings of, okay, I have to do all of this, right? What I'm asking you to do is to not give it up. I'm asking you to look for how you can be more flexible, right? It's not about removing everything, right? Because you might say like, oh no, I do really well when I go to my Orange Theory class or whatever it is that you like doing, right? No shade. I have no problem with it. Like you should do that, right? The thing is here's where the obsession can be shown. And here's where like the tight rules versus flexibility, right? And this is where you come up with your non-negotiables. I'm just trying to give an example, but let's say you're like, well, I have to go to the gym 5 times a week. Okay. I would like for you to question why. And is that rigid or is that flexible? Answer the question for yourself, right? I think we all know the answer, right? Like the answer is no, it's not, right? Like it's very rigid. And so some people might be listening and saying, oh, but Christina, I have kids at home. I have a busy schedule. I have to like be a little bit more clear about when I'm going and when I'm doing that. Otherwise it becomes this elusive thing of like, oh, I'd like to go to the gym. But like, if I don't create time for it, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with scheduling and having structure and creating a plan. But there's a difference between I'm going to go to the gym at these classes and I'm going to block out my calendar and I'm going to be intentional about making time for myself to do this activity that I really care about. I'm going to make sure that we have laundry done. Therefore, I'm going to carve out time to do it. Or I'm going to make sure that we have groceries. So I have to carve out time to go and make sure that I have this available to me. It's no different than I'm going to make time for going to get movement in or whatever it is versus I have to go and do this thing 5 days a week. I have to go grocery shopping, meal prep, and have all of my lunches perfectly portioned and all the different things. Otherwise, I'm going to fail this week. There's a huge, huge difference between the internal narrative, because if the idea is like, okay, I have this plan, but it's flexible. Oh my God, I had to take the dog to the vet. Well, there you go. Don't go to the gym today. Like it's got to get changed, right? Instead of having a come apart and being like, oh my God, I'm now failing at this week. Everything is like coming apart. Everything's unraveling now. Instead, it's okay. I have a plan for this. We can be flexible. I'm not going to shame myself about this. This is why I had this plan. I have to deviate and I have to come up with a new way of another day that I can go instead. There's so much more compassion, flexibility, and support. And you're not giving up the behavior. You're giving up the shame and guilt and obsession with executing that behavior and giving up if you don't execute that behavior, you're a shitty person, you're no good, and now your values and health are out the window.
The way that I also like to reframe this, especially around New Year's resolution time, is we all are trying to add things in my mind, to bring like less chaos and less overwhelm. If the things that you are adding in and the standards that you're trying to hold yourself to are adding more chaos and more overwhelm, we're going in the wrong direction. And so there's a huge difference, like Christina was saying, between I would like to go to the gym X amount of times per week versus I must go to the gym 5 times per week. Otherwise, I'm not healthy. And let's say you're going from like, I have let's say you've gone to the gym 2 times a week or something, and that's like your routine and you typically do that. And you're like, you know what? I want to try and go 3 times per week. I think that would be great for my mental health, be great for my cardiovascular health, be great for my whatever, whatever. Awesome. That doesn't mean that if 3 weeks out of January you go 3 times and one time you only go 2 times, that doesn't mean that you're failing at your goal. The reframe here is you used to go 2 times a week, and most of the time you've gone 3 times a week. What I always go back to is it's what we do most of the time that ultimately matters in the long term for your health and really everything, right? Like, and I think the other big reframe that has to happen is if you are feeling those feelings of guilt and shame and whatever of, oh, I didn't stick to my thing. That's not because you're a failure. That's the perfectionism coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectionism never works in the long term. Let's just leave that right there. It never works in the long term. And so even if, again, you have a goal of like, I would like to eat 3 servings of vegetables every single day or whatever. If you went from eating 0 servings of vegetables or not being intentional about it at all before, and now 4 days this week, you've eaten 3 servings of vegetables, that's some ungodly increase of percentage over what you were doing before. And so I think switching the focus from this one thing that I didn't do to like, wow, look at all of the things that I did. And also looking at when you're trying to figure out what are the most, let's say like cornerstone things that you can try to focus on. I always go back to how can I not feel like I'm a chicken with my head cut off running around on Monday because I haven't been able to do XYZ on Sunday? That's what I always lean into is like, how can I feel more settled? How can I feel more set up for the week? And trying to not think about the entire year and like, this is the first day of the rest of my life on January 1st, because that is
oh my God,
so much pressure. So much pressure.
Yeah.
And so again, going back to a little bit of an audit for yourself, because everybody's health promoting behaviors are going to look different. Everybody has a different starting place. Everybody has different priorities. Everybody has different family unit setups and whatever major stressors you have going on in your life. And so if you think about what are the things that I really struggle with that I would like to get better at that I think are going to be super helpful for me? Maybe it's like drinking more water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, focus on that first. It's also so much easier to roll habits into each other once you already have the ball rolling. Instead of being like, I'm going to try 5 new things on January 1st. I'm going to do every single thing. And if I don't do them, then I'm a failure. It's let's try and do one thing. Let's try for a couple weeks. Let's try to drink more water. You can set an ounce amount. You can get a little cute. There's an app on your phone called Water Llama. That's adorable. Highly recommend it. I'm pretty sure it's free. Like you can do stuff like that and then just try and do one thing at a time, because once it's easy for you to drink your water goal or whatever, it's so much easier to then work on another habit because this one is mindless. You've got it. It's in the bag, right? Instead of trying to be like, I'm going to do this with my food. I'm going to do this with my water. I'm going to sleep 18 hours a night. Insane. I try to throw out a completely crazy number there, right? But it's
They
so
don't have children.
if you're sleeping 18 hours a night, you have a disease. So
you're sleeping all day.
or depression,
all
which
day.
is also a disease, right? So please go see a doctor if you're sleeping 18 hours a day consistently. Anyway, so try and take some of the pressure off yourself, because doing that will help you make these habits more sustainable in the long term and actually help you with the goal that you're going for in the long term.
Yeah, I think I want to leave you guys with this because I feel like we've been really drilling this in, but I can't help myself. So I have something else to say.
I don't know what's coming. I'm a little scared and excited.
No, I guess my point, one of the things that I feel like we've been focusing a lot on is creating more in a term that we and Dana have used a lot and we use a lot with our clients is sometimes intentional flexibility. And I think that there could be people out there who are listening like, well, this past year was really hard for me and I didn't really spend much time taking care of myself. And I really want to reclaim that and take more time for myself. You might have a long list of things that you want to do, right? You might have this long list of like, I would like to start reclaiming some things for myself and start taking care of my personal health rather than everyone around me or whatever it is that might be doing it. So yes, there's intentional flexibility that needs to happen. And yes, there's also a segment of people too that can take from this as well. That's yes, we also can be intentional, and not be all or nothing. There is a way to be intentional of, okay, I need to build this habit. I need to make time for this. I'm going to carve this out. And sometimes I have to like suck it up and just go to build the habit. And also, I'm also not going to shame myself, and I can be compassionate. I can be flexible and understanding. And also I know that I might need a little bit more of a push because I'm out of practice. And there's different people for both of those, right? I relate more to you guys than I do the people who need the intentional I have plenty of things that I need intentional flexibility about. For sure. But for me, sometimes some of the things that I focus on is, okay, I actually need to prioritize some of these things. And how do I do that without being shamey or guilting myself or hyper focused on it? Is again, creating like, how can I make this in a way that's flexible, but clear? You can have structure, you can have a plan, and you can be compassionate, understanding, and flexible with yourself when things get derailed. And I think that's something important to remember too. And to kind of bring in that, again, you doing health promoting behaviors or not says nothing about you as a person. I think when we feel that feelings of, well, I'm not good enough if I'm not doing these things, red flags, guys. Red flags everywhere. If you have this feeling of, I'm not doing enough, I'm not good enough. If that comes up, I'm waving major red flags for the approach, not the health promoting behaviors necessarily. Sometimes that is the case, but that's a whole nother topic. But it's usually about the obsession around it and the intent behind where within us it's getting driven from is usually where we need to stop and say, okay, what beliefs am I bringing into this rule? And am I being too rigid? Because clearly I must be if all of a sudden I'm feeling like I'm not good enough if I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. Because those are just things and you are so much more than those things.
Yes. And if you want more specific guidance on this, I'm going to link a couple of episodes in the description or in the show notes, no matter what podcast app you're listening on. So one of them is how to get back on track for the new year without restriction or perfectionism. Another one is setting New Year's intentions and goals from a non-diet, non-restrictive mindset. So those are both available in our Patreon community. So those will be listed in the description. I also mentioned 75 No Thanks, I'm Busy That Day, which is an episode we did earlier last year, debunking a bunch of different, quote, health and wellness trends. And we will link that as well.
Good luck, guys. We're here. Join the community.
You have questions, you got comments, you can always head over to Patreon where we're doing episode discussion, bonus episodes, even more resources and stuff. We have a lot coming over there this month, and so stay tuned. We'll see you next week.